To complete our Unreal Basics tutorials, we're going to make a simple enemy that will just walk back and forth between 2 points. So let's get started right away with that. And in our blueprints folder over here, we'll make a new blueprint and we'll make that a character because we're going to want a character that can walk from point A to point B. We'll call it enemy blueprint. So let's give it a quick skeletal mesh and animation class. You'll be able to get more in depth with that in future videos, I'm sure. For right now, it doesn't matter too much. So we just have something to visualize the fact that we have an enemy walking somewhere. The important part is what we'll do with the script. So we'll start by making a new variable and we'll call that a walking point or something along those lines. And the variable type is going to be changed to being an actor and object reference. We're also going to change this from a variable type of just a single one to an array so it can hold multiple values. I'm not sure if we've gone over arrays yet, but an array is just one single variable that can hold multiple values within it. So as you can see over here, we have this one variable has a value for index 0, a value for index 1, a value for index 2, and so on and so forth. You can dynamically add indexes, take indexes away during gameplay. It's a very good way to deal with a lot of data. Now we're also going to make a variable current target, which is also going to be a actor object reference, but this is going to be a single one. This is going to be the target that we're at that moment walking towards with this specific enemy. So at event begin play, we'll set the current target to being equal to a walking point reference, which we can get from holding control and dragging. And then we'll get a copy of index 0. So that's just number 0 in the entire list that that array has. So our current target has a value. We'll then make a custom event and call it walk2. In that, we will use move to location or actor, which is an AI navigation task. So firstly, we're going to get the AI controller. And for that, we need a controlled actor, which is just the actor that we have here. So we can just get a reference to self. And then our goal is our current target. So holding control, we drag a reference into that. And then on move finished, we change what walking point we're walking towards. So for that, we're actually going to need another variable here. And we're going to call it index int, which is obviously going to be an integer variable. So after the move finishes here, we're going to get a reference to our newly made index int. And we're going to type ++ to get an increment integer. This will, as we've discussed before, increment this integer by 1. Now we're going to do a little bit of trickery here. We're going to copy over this reference to our array here. And we're going to get the last index here. So we're going to compare these two. And if this is larger than the last index, that means we'll have to loop around. Otherwise, we don't have to loop around and we can just pick the next index for our current target. So we drag off this and we get a greater than node. So if this new index int is greater than the last index, this will either give a true or false output, whether or not that's true. We can then use that in this branch over here. So if we plug this into the condition, if that's true, we'll execute this piece of code. If that's false, we'll execute that piece of code. It's very important to hook up the previous node into it as well, though. So if this index integer is larger than the last index of this array, we're just going to want to set this index integer back to 0. It's as easy as that. And if it's false, we really don't need to do anything. So now we want to set our current target to something else. So again, we can just drag that in and get another reference to our array here. And then we can get a copy, and we'll get the copy corresponding to our index integer variable here. And that will then be set to our new target. We can just hook this straight up into there and this into there. So now what will happen is we'll move to our first target location. Then when that move is finished, our index integer will be incremented by 1. Then if that exceeds our last index in our array, which could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, it will get reset back to 0, so it loops back around. If it's not greater than that, it'll just leave it alone, and we move on to setting our current target to the next one down the line. And then we can just run this walk to event again, and it will just keep looping. Of course, we do also need to put the walk to event at begin play, but this really is as easy as it is. It's a little messy looking, but it's a pretty easy script and it works wonderfully. So now let's put the enemy blueprint somewhere near the beginning of the level so we can easily test it. So we put that guy over here somewhere, and now we need 2 actors for it to walk back and forth between. So we can just make a simple actor, a normal one will do, and we'll just call it empty. And that we can use as just a reference point to get the transform location for those 2 points. But now if we go into this details panel here, we can't really do anything, and that's because over in the blueprint here, we haven't set the walking points array to being public. So if we set that to public, and we go back into this, having this enemy selected, going into the details panel, we'll now see this walking points array over here. So we can add 2 array elements. We can have a little pick drop thing here, meaning that we can pick this actor, then pick this other actor. So now one last thing we need to do is we need to actually place another thing over here, because at this point, this enemy AI can't actually walk. In order for this enemy AI to be able to walk, we're going to need a nav mesh. So we can get this nav mesh bounce volume. We place it on here. And if you go up here into show, you should see here navigation. You can also enable it with P. And that will show you this little green overlay that shows you what parts of your level are included in a nav mesh. Now we can make this bigger, and we need to make this at least big enough for it to walk all the way over there and over there. So now it has the nav mesh to be able to reach both of these things. If you don't include that, your character just won't be able to walk. So now if we play the game, you will see this enemy is moving back and forth between these 2 points. And obviously, it's a little rough right now. It's also not an enemy that we can kill in any meaningful way. But by and large, this is the basics of how it works. And I also just killed myself. Now, you can add a lot more scripts to this to kill it when it gets landed on, when it gets stomped on by the player, for instance. You can add something like a projectile when the player gets in reach and all that kind of stuff. You can get really, really complicated with this. If you want to see more about AI walking around, I do have a mini-series on making a shooting AI, which I would highly recommend you look into. This is just the very basics of working with the AI capabilities of the Unreal Engine. It's relatively easy, but it's also very powerful once you get into the slightly more complicated side of things. For now, I think I've given you all the tools you need to make a basic 2D platformer. So go wild, make whatever you want to make, and maybe take another look at some of the videos on the channel if you've got any questions.